my first question really is a little bit more fundamental, which is the world actually more uncertain now? It's a bit of a, it's a fixed idea, it's a cliche, we hear it all the time, but is that actually the case? And if so, in what sort of aspect?
Yeah, I think that is an excellent question, because on the one hand, we've never been better off economically, globally, than we are now. Mm-hmm. That's just objective fact. On the other hand, there's all this kind of angst about change and angst about uncertainty that is the fallout of the 2008 crash. Things that we never thought would happen started to happen then, and it's now become self-fulfilling. So here's what I think has happened. So after 2008, there were lots of people who felt kind of economically threatened and vulnerable. One of the things we know from research that goes back 50 years, people have been reconfirming now, is that when people feel economic threat, they're more likely to go for dominance in their leaders as opposed to competence.
Right.
Okay? And then those dominant leaders take strong actions which unsettle other people. And if you think about, Donald Trump is a perfect example of his strong actions that the people who support him take unsettle other people who thought they were settled. The middle classes, the upper middle classes. Never the truly wealthy, because quite frankly they can just do whatever they want anywhere and move from place to place. Mm-hmm. There's this kind of global super wealthy, but I'm talking about the bulk of people now. And it's not just Donald Trump, it's also everything that's happened. It's happened in Hungary, it's just happened in Brazil, it's happened in India, it's happening, in the Philippines, it's happening, all over the place. And so it began in, this kind of current wave of it began in 2008, but we're now seeing the ripples and we're seeing the kind of, bigger and bigger, even though from an objective point of view, more people are better off now than they've ever been. Technology has made our lives simpler and easier in many ways, more now than ever so before. Quite frankly, there's if we go by what, there's less threats, in most ways than there's ever been from, sudden disease, psycho disease, all-out warfare, all those things that have diminished for most people, most places. I'm in the Middle East right now, even here, right? Those kind of threats and the changes that have happened here are mostly ones that should be at one level reassuring, but they've become anything but. So now we have, the Crown Prince and essentially regent in Saudi Arabia, again, a strong, dominant leader making massive changes that have unsettled other people.
It's interesting. It's interesting you're talking about the politics, because I agree with you. I think this is it creates a sort of atmosphere of anxiety, and I'm interested. Well, I've got lots of questions. One of them is, does that sort of, if that's what you're suggesting, there's just a sort of general feeling of uncertainty, which kind of trickles down from the politics. So I'm wondering how that sort of plays out in business, and like you say, people choosing more like autocratic CEOs maybe. Because I don't know, but I was reading a very old 20-year-old McKinsey paper about uncertainty, and they were saying if you're feeling uncertain, you can actually solve a lot of it with maths. You can draw out the probabilities that things will happen, and once you start doing that, it looks much less scary. But I don't know whether that really helps or works.
I'm not sure it works, because at this point it's an emotional contagion thing.
Okay.
One of the things, good work in organizational behavior from Sigal Barsad, who's at Wharton now, shows that contagion or affect is really powerful. And so, you can't distinguish between what's going on in the political world and what's going on in the world of business very well right now. People, the uncertainty they feel from the political has direct knock-on effects in business, which makes people feel generally anxious. And from, again, good research going back quite some time, there's a really classic paper talking about the kind of threat rigidity effects. Uncertainty is a threat for most people, and when people and organizations and businesses feel threatened, it's really consistent what happens. Organizations, individuals, teams, all resort to the things that they know have worked in the past.
Right.
And that's why you see it in politics most clearly, but even in the world of business, what you'll see is that people go to the things that they know have worked historically. Now, rather ironically, if you actually look at the data, the organizations that go to the safe things, people feel better, but they do financially worse.
Mm-hmm.
So what reassures me emotionally tends to backfire from a strategic point of view in a business. Again, really good work showing that the organizations that do well in the crisis are the ones who find other ways to reassure their people and actually take advantage of the change that's going on out there, as opposed to creating this kind of I don't know if it's a salve or whatever you call it that they would place on on people that makes them feel good because make America great again in the political realm, right? Is a salve to make people feel good. It's not. There's whether returning to a mythological time is somehow better. It's highly doubtful. You actually have to, go to the things that are dealing with the problems we have today, not the problems of the past.
Yes, I always think this is interesting. Years ago, I remember talking to a behavioural economist who was saying, when you talk about investing your money, and the most basic thing in the world when you talk to a financial advisor is they talk about your risk profile. And, the point is, there's no point having higher returns if that makes you so nervous that you're awake at night. Worrying. So a question, I suppose, is, are these businesses doing the right thing to become rigid and make fewer returns and reassure people? There's a argument that that's actually the best course of action because your people are happier, even though your business is less robust.
Yeah, calming people down is necessary but insufficient condition for making because when we're calm, we're rational. Mm-hmm. When we get emotional, we become more irrational. Mm-hmm. And so there's an instinct which says, go back to what everybody knows, it will reassure them. And you're right to suggest that there's a way in which that's true, but it won't do well for your business. And the question is, just how quickly will the disruptive technology that's coming, unseat you?
Yeah.
If you can find other ways to reassure people, and so, what I advise in my own classrooms when I talk about change is you have to be able to reassure on values and principles, but our tactics to achieve it need to be different. So we've always valued, the relationship with the customer, but our customers are now different from what they were before. So tactically speaking, we have to engage change. And it's a real skill. If you think of, your average CEO, and their ability to, and the senior leadership in an organization to be able to make that kind of a nuanced argument with the 50,000 people who work for them, across the globe. Because that's a subtle argument. It's not don't worry, everything's fine, because it's not fine. And it's also not, everything needs to change, because, some CEOs and senior leadership teams try that tactic, which is like, and they misunderstand their own wealth and wealth gives you a sense of